We have a lot to cover from SDL39's to SW1200's that need upgrading. Genie? An NP unit? We take a look at another railroad, a Brekina truck.
Everybody collectively getting their job done.
And dive into a little more operations, which we've got a lot to cover.
But when it is all said and done, we're just trying to give you an overview of what you can do in the hobby.
And also check out what the Curmudgeon's gripe of the week is this week. Only in this episode of Sue the Milwaukee Road.
Oh, hey, how's it going? We've covered a lot of content over the past few seasons, from the GN 1970 to the Sue the Milwaukee Road series. It's over 90 episodes.
That's a lot.
We've covered everything from the proto throttle modifications to the Overland upgrades of the SDL39 to ScaleTrains coming out with theirs.
We really haven't covered the ScaleTrains ones.
But we're getting there.
We are looking at weathering techniques, as far as upgrades on the railroad, servos, you name it, we've kind of covered it.
Not in the most nitty-gritty detail.
Nitty-gritty.
But when it is all said and done, we're just trying to give you an overview of what you can do in the hobby. Give you some ideas. We've had great feedback and communications with everybody that's left comments. So with this being the 90th episode, we're going to go over just some of the things that we have covered in the past, as well as address some of the new things coming up. ScaleTrains, SDL39, that's a given. Let's start taking a look.
Doing a head-to-head, the SDL39's Overland versus ScaleTrains.
This isn't just a rake it through the coals review, this is just an honest look between the locomotives, the one I did and the one that just came out. Let's take a look.
All right, we're going to take a look and a listen to these locomotives. We've got the Overland on top with the ScaleTrains on the bottom. I'm going to mute one of them so you can get a better listen to it. So for you guys that hate the audio and the sound of locomotives,
eat your heart out.
We're going to mute the Overland first and give a listen to the ScaleTrains right now. And the point goes to Overland, and well, not directly Overland because the Scale sound system speaker I think is doing a lot of the heavy lifting using the ESU file that's installed in this locomotive. Nicely done, Scale sound systems.
The SDLs were transferred to the Sioux Line Railroad when it acquired the Milwaukee Road. All were subsequently included in the sale of the Sioux Lake States Division to the New Wisconsin Central Limited after the WC was purchased by and merged into the CN. Returned to the lesser and sold to the FEPASA, a Chilean freight operation. True or false, were all the SDL39's part of the Sioux-Milwaukee merger? We'll find out later in this episode.
All right, here we have another Rapido SW1200 in Great Northern paint, and no, we're not going to do another one. We're going to take this locomotive to the next level, and well, actually to a different railroad. In this application, we are going to go through the process of relettering it to a Lake Superior terminal and transfer locomotive. And to go about doing that, I end up removing the factory lettering. I use a product called Super Clean in conjunction with a paper towel or at least a soft tissue to be able to soak up the Super Clean and set it on the areas in which I want to remove the graphics. Now, mind you want it right on the letters or the location that you'd like to have removed because, well, if you don't, you're going to take off a little too much. It does not affect the base paint. At least in the experience that I've had, I've left it overnight and it will not attack the base paint, but it will go after that lettering and the yellow striping in this Great Northern locomotive. So you want to keep it a little under control. Hence the tissue paper. Now we're set to be able to decal this up, and we'll look at that in a little bit.
Overland versus ScaleTrains head-to-head continued.
Taking a real brief look at the SDL39 without its shell on. To give you an idea of the lights, I'm actually replacing and just putting in a spacer for the issue with the pilot.
I'm not going to carry on about it.
I'm just going to show you what I'm using.
I end up just taking a KD coupler pocket, and the KD coupler pocket ends up just being trimmed down to a little small piece, right like that there. So that's what I trimmed it down to, and that's what I end up putting in there for the spacer. You get the general idea. ScaleTrains suggested 2 washers. Well, instead of waiting for the washers, I just trimmed down a KD coupler pocket. It's the same thickness, 0.025, and it does the trick. I did have one of the SDL39's missing its beacon. It fell off. Well, ScaleTrains did replace it. I contacted them, asked them about the washers and the beacon. They didn't send the washers, but they did send the beacon, and here it is. It's an easy enough replacement. Any of these little issues that do come up with the manufacturer, they're easy enough to replace. This little guy, end up just popping it on top of it with a little bit of glue, and now we're back in business. Not ideal to have to repair, but it was taken care of, and that's all that really matters. Hey, what's the top speed of the SDL39?
I can go faster than my VW bus.
Just want to take a brief moment to look at some of the locomotives that we upgraded throughout the series. The number of LEDs that were installed.
Well, we know these guys were the LED junkies.
I ended up with about 17 to 19 LEDs per locomotive. That all adds up when you do the class lights, the ground lights. There are 4 LEDs in the beacons, but you kind of get the idea as far as the LED world and some of the upgrades that we've worked on. So we're going to look at these locomotives as well as the ScaleTrains locomotives in just a little bit. Before we do, we're going to continue reviewing some of the stuff that we covered. We've not covered the Brekina cab over, but we will get there.
All right, I was just going to cut the stacks down for the spark arrestors. I can see that they're actually a little bit long in terms of how they fit in here, but you can cut this post down and you should be able to have yourself a little bit better spark arrestor. So to be able to get these things out, what I did is I just turned the shell over and right in the center of the square, just took a knife and popped it free. I was able to pop it out. There is glue on these. The other one, this one was a lot harder to get to pop free, but once you've popped it free, you can then just take your spark arrestor and align it because it is a rectangle in the holes. And there you have it. As you can see, the spark arrestors are sitting high, so I end up just taking this one out, cutting down this post just a little bit, and then reseating the spark arrestor. So now it's sitting at a more prototypical height, you can see there, versus what they had. So that's how you install spark arrestors on the Rapido SW1200's. Here we're taking a look at a Brekina Kenworth K100 cab over. Nice little vehicle. I started the modification by drilling out the holes in the wheels and decided I'm going to move on to the panel wash.
It fixes everything.
You put that in the recesses just to give it a little bit more detail. I do it in the front bumpers as well, just in areas that you want to be able to put that representation that it's actually kind of a through or a hole or a deep spot. Ends up working out quite well.
Each end of the SW1200 had some reporting marks that needed to be removed. Well, same application, and in the end, came out quite good.
In an effort to show you how I got the beacon set up the way it is, I took a Western Cullen style beacon made by Details Associates. It was not a cord version. Details West makes a cord version, but this one is a plastic, a little bit more fine. And I end up drilling out the post of the gray, and you can see that I drilled out so the wires could fit through it. And then also drilled up into the actual beacon itself, just so the LED, which is very hard to see, but it's in there. It's covered in tape right now because I painted it silver. But you get the idea as far as being able to light this beacon, and those are the steps that were taken to be able to get the beacon functioning the way you see it. There are so many little details on the SW1200, like the number boards. I end up filing off the old print, and well, it turned into a snowball effect. Snowball effect, we blew this thing into a million pieces, and well, it took a little while to get things back together because when we're at this phase, I looked at it and said,
Hold on a second. Something ain't right. I can't put my finger on it, but something ain't right.
It turns out the GN trucks weren't the right trucks. What do you need? Well, we need NP trucks. Well, what do? You take the NP trucks, you take them off the NP unit, and put them onto the Great Northern unit, and take the ones that were on the Great Northern unit and put them onto the NP unit. Well, that makes the NP unit incorrect. Well, we're not worried about that. We're trying to get ours right. And speaking of getting things right, we need to get the viscosity right for VMA's Vantage Modeling Solutions. We end up shooting it through the airbrush to get ourselves a nice smooth finish over the decals and seal them in. We end up moving on to bending up the custom grab irons on the ends because the original ones that came on the GN, well, they weren't right. We end up modifying it, getting them painted black. The black that we used was the Rust-Oleum Camouflage Flat Black. It's still drying at this point, but an excellent product for doing side frames as well as the fuel tank. Now, I did weather this up a little bit, and again, you say, how did you go from all of this to that final product? You skipped a lot of steps.
Well, here's the secret to it.
There!
Well, it must have been some kind of magic to get to this point because, well, in the end, to be able to go from the Great Northern on top to the finished product on the bottom...
There's more to it than taco sauce.
Well, as we move on from the SW1200 project completion, we end up swinging into the M&NR. This is the Minnesota Commercial located in St. Paul. Just taking a look to see what's going on, and, well, not going to lie, not a whole lot. It's pretty quiet around here, but we had the opportunity to check out, well, one of the locomotives that was sitting out. And, well, just before that, we ended up checking out one of the Minnesota Commercial locomotives that was sitting on a local railroad here. This is the Newport Club. It had been a number of years since we had been to the layout, but they did have an open house following one of their flea markets, so it was kind of neat to see what these guys have been up to. So let's take a look. Being a big fan of LEDs, I had to check this out.
Big fan of LEDs? I think you got a problem.
It's definitely neat to see some of the details these guys are putting into this stuff. The scenes are kind of neat to be able to check out, and you end up looking at a lot of different angles, and, well, again,
Taking in what you see.
one of the things I thought was kind of neat was the custom painted locomotives on the left-hand side. I don't know the power that's in the distance, but we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. The stuff in the foreground here, I believe it's Canadian. I don't know the model exactly, but at the end of the day, it's cool to see. And for those that do know what it is,
Yell it at the TV and say,
Oh, you don't know what that is?
well, I don't. It's cool to check out. It's neat to see some modelers and all the stuff that they're doing. So let's just kind of kick back and check out the rest of what the Newport Club had to offer. I've got one new contribution until death do us part. A big thanks to the Newport group for inviting us out to check out the railroad. It's definitely cool to see and look forward to seeing again in the future.
Well, you got a 50-50 shot this week. Did you guess true or false? False? Well, that was correct. Number 581 was wrecked at Sacred Heart, Minnesota in 1983 and scrapped the following year.
All right, we continue with the Brekina truck, and the modifications we make here is actually taking care of the whip antennas on the mirrors. I use a little piece of engineering stainless steel. It's the same stuff I use for regular antennas for cars, but I cut this antenna off. I end up drilling out a little small hole in the top of the mirror to be able to then insert the new piece of antenna. And the reason I did this is because the actual antenna heights are a little bit taller. Here's the hole that I drilled, and I'm going to end up sticking the antenna in here. As you can see, it's very fine, it's very thin, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a detail that's well worth doing, but most people look at it and go,
Oh, you're wasting your time.
maybe I am.
But at the end of the day, I really do like the way this truck ended up turning out. A little bit of details, obviously use the taco sauce, and end up getting ourselves a nice looking truck at the end of the day. So it's little modifications like this that end up going a long way. I even added windshield wipers. These were John Tyson etched metal windshield wipers. I drill out 2 holes with a .080 Walters bit. They break more often than they don't, but make sure you got enough on hand to be able to put these in. It's a subtle detail. Again, probably don't have to do it, but at the end of the day, I think it's cool, so I end up doing it. I end up using a Q-tip to be able to clean off the windows and fingerprints that are on the chrome, and hopefully that gives it a better look. Now here's a modification to the horns, and what I'm doing is taking drill bits and stepping them down in size from larger to smaller, and then filling it in with chrome to try to give it that look that the horn has actually got a concave shape to it. So you can use this on locomotives, you can work it on the trucks, and as you can see here, I use the Panline accent wash,
Because you gotta have taco sauce.
and work it down into the horn to give it a more recessed look.
Ops. Oh, the drama. Gets old.
So does your face.
What's with the hillbilly getaway music?
That's what they do in all railroad videos.
What's going on here?
We cobbled together a cast of characters to run the railroad again.
With the number of trains to run, it takes about 6 to 7 guys to run the GN in 1970s, so we brought back some of the old cast of characters, some of the originals that first started running this railroad years ago. These guys were running the railroad back when we used to operate with car cards, and we've moved on to switch list, as you know.
Please don't do another segment on JMRI.
Well, as we look at the operating session here, I had a number of viewers that have asked to see a session in action. And as the dispatcher get the chance to rail fan here, we got Mike set up with the red over yellow. He's going to take the siding. Once he clears, Troy can work his way down. We ran a number of different trains during this session, and well, let's take a live look inside a session itself. Well, I wasn't the only one that had the opportunity to rail fan during a session. You've got Paul here checking out some of the freight cars.
I think he's just reading car numbers.
But nonetheless, Colin, our yardmaster, had the opportunity to check out some of the action that was passing by. Here we have Train 98 passing by his SW1200. And just before that aerial shot was taken here, we had Train 98 approaching into Lyndale Yard, giving us a look at SW1200 number 29. That, yes, this is the unit that got frosted.
Frosty the Snowman.
Now here's a look at the dispatcher panel to note that Train 97 is working its way westward after Train 98 yarded itself in Union. We got Train 360 doing some work in Delano. Mike is operating that particular job, and he's just pulled into the siding. Getting a live look during an op session. How's it going there, Paul? Good.
He's awfully serious.
He's doing his job. Chicago Northwestern transfer. We got Darren out there working Union.
Believe it or not, Grizzly Adams is half my age.
Everybody collectively getting their job done.
Whether it's right or not, we'll find out later.
And before you jump up on your Irish Spring soapbox, realize that it's about having a good time. If guys don't get cars in the right spot, don't really care. We'll eventually figure things out, as long as you have a good time in the process of going through the switch list.
Well, as we wrap things up here at the GN in 1970 for the third and final session of this particular cycle, we're going to work our way back to the top of the list and start her all over again.
Here's a rare bird, Empire Builder. You don't see that all too often.
At the conclusion of this session, we ran 12 trains, but after the conclusion of this being the third session, we completed 32 trains. A big thanks to all those crew members that
spun a knob, shuffled a yard, spotted cars, routed trains, took time to run, made the drive, and hopefully y'all enjoyed yourselves, including you, the viewers.
I did cover upgrading trucks and vehicles to be able to make them look a little bit more unique. Going from the stock factory, this is just it's called a Real Rides Malibu model. 187 scale, it was from Dazed and Confused, the movie. So it's a 1972 Chevy C10 pickup. I ended up upgrading it. Someone wanted to see this in a little bit more detail. I've covered so much of this stuff and so much content, I don't recall exactly what episodes they were in. But this is the C10, same truck. Obviously it's been upgraded, and I custom painted it and then applied some custom decals that I created. I had sold these decal sets a while back. There might be a couple left, but this one's going to be going on this orange truck that's here, so that's going to be a future project. But like everything, there's future projects for everything. I'm working on trying to get stuff done, but like anything, it's kind of an endless process. And I tackle stuff just based on what I enjoy doing. This was a 1969 or 68 Charger that I ended up modifying the grill. The original grill looked kind of goofy, So I made some decals and modified it that way. And I covered that also in a previous episode. We obviously covered these proto throttles. This is the slimmest proto throttle that I think is out there. I ended up modifying it even further. So the actual faceplate and everything was, this has been cut down. So it's been modified in such a way that it is extremely thin. So if you're holding it with one hand, you can at least manage function. Obviously throttling up and braking and hitting your reverse and that sort of thing. So kind of neat in that regard. It's fun to be able to go through and modify these things. I am working on an alternate battery source on the bottom. There's been a number of different great suggestions in terms of that. So we'll get to that at some point, possibly. It's not a guarantee. There's just so much stuff that we cover that we can't cover it all. A big thanks to Jeff. Jeff actually had sent me, he's one of the viewers, a SOO 4750 tangent car. These things are like extremely hard to find, or at least I haven't been able to find them. And as a thanks in return back to Jeff, here's a SW1200. It's a Rapido locomotive. And then, of course, the SDL39's. These are the ScaleTrains SDL39's that everybody was hooing and hawing about.
Belly aching about, in this case, I belly ached about the beacon.
So I would prefer the actual prototype style beacon, which is here. That's an Aaron Henne or Hein beacon. It's an RB1. So
Little details, little issues, anything that comes along that people want to bellyache and complain about, we'll leave that to the Curmudgeon.
But this is just some of the stuff that we covered throughout the past seasons, and hopefully enjoy the future seasons of SOO the Milwaukee Road.
Overland versus ScaleTrains head-to-head continued.
I think in the end, the overall head-to-head battle is kind of a joke, but when it is all said and done, the best model between these two, in my opinion, is the ScaleTrains model. The Overlands are nice to have. I'm not necessarily getting rid of them. I'm pleased with the way they turned out. So at the end of the day, ScaleTrains or Overland, whichever one you might have, enjoy them. They're SDL39's. How cool is that? So I'm going to end it with
Less complaining, more enjoying. Let's get back to trains.
Alright, here's Curmudgeon coming at you for the gripe of the week. The gripe of the week this week is about all those manufacturers that can't get it right. I mean, they're not getting the details right. I got all the expectations that are beyond ridiculous. I'm telling you right now, I'm asking for every little tiny detail. You missed that bolt on the second step on the far end of the locomotive. I'm returning it. This ain't right. Well, all the belly aching and complaining the Curmudgeon does? Well, tell you what, Pitchfork Nation is out and after you manufacturers, so get it right. And that's the Curmudgeon's gripe of the week. I got all the expectations that are beyond ridiculous.
big thanks to everybody that watches to the end, that has hit like, hit subscribe, as well as made comments in the past. It's those actions that help share this content, so if you haven't checked out other episodes, feel free to do so. You can also check out the tour of the GN in 1970, as well as the past episodes of the GN in 1970.
70s. I got all the expectations that are beyond ridiculous.